It's Astrology Roast. I think it needs to sound like a shitty intro, like a funny shitty intro.
Hi everyone and welcome back to Astrology Roast. My name's Karen and I'm delighted as always to be here with you now.
My name is Itai and I'm super excited to be here too.
And we've got a really special topic to explore with you today on our podcast, one that's actually very close to our hearts. So today we're going to just talk about something quite light and superficial, intergenerational trauma. And that's trauma with a capital T. If anyone's writing notes, as I know that you all do.
I thought it's trauma with capital, all of the letters.
Yeah, in capitals, intergenerational trauma. And, you know, as me and Itai have discussed over many episodes, we are from the Jewish background. I'm from a European Jewish background. Itai's from a Moroccan, Mizrahi, Sephardi Jewish background. So we have a lot of stories to explore around intergenerational trauma and how that relates to us and loosely how that relates to astrology as well.
I know some of you may think, sitting now thinking, what does it have to do with astrology? But I think that we often talk about the planets and how they shape and the energy and how they shape us. But our ancestors in a way are also the planets that surround us and the planets that they might not even be alive. But, you know, the remnants of their energy is definitely a part of our reality right now. But it's not just going to be the two of us today because we do have a special guest that can teach us a lot about generational or any kind of trauma when you think about it. And that is Lauren Glezer.
Wow. Thank you for that warm welcoming. Which flavor should we start with?
Oh my gosh. Well, for those who don't know Lauren Glezer, I mean, how could you not know her? She has 3 Instagrams. She got thousands of followers. She has a bag industry that is going off the charts called Kapara Designs.
Follow her on Instagram at
Kapara Designs.
At Kapara Design, at Lauren Glezer, at Miss Inside and Out.
Any more ads?
No.
So, well, let's just jump right in. Generational trauma.
Yeah, what's the deal with that? I mean, I've got a lot of stories from my growing up that relate to intergenerational trauma. So I remember when I was a kid, Steven Spielberg filmed a huge project recording the testimonies of all Holocaust survivors around the world. So, of course, he decided to come to Melbourne, and when I was about 6, I think. I mean, I was huge in the video, so I don't know how old I was. I was wearing a giant Ren and Stimpy t-shirt, and I had like a bob haircut. But they came to film my grandfather and my grandmother and record their testimonies of their experience as Holocaust survivors. So recently I decided to go to the Holocaust Museum, which is in Elsternwick in Melbourne, if anyone got an interest in these things. I went to the Holocaust Museum where I could view the testimonies. And so anyone out there who also has grandparents that were filmed with Steven Spielberg's fancy project, you can go and view it at a Holocaust museum near you. But I went there to have a look and I got to see the video, which was quite emotional and really, really eye-opening. But in the video, they also filmed me, my sister, my parents, and my grandfather as part of the testimony. And they asked me as a little as a pretty chunky 7-year-old kid, you know, how do you feel hearing your grandfather's testimony in front of him? And my whole family was there as well. And I looked up and I just go, oh, I guess it's pretty good that I'm alive. That we survived. And I was like, oh my God. And then my mother's there and she starts talking about whilst holding my baby brother, talking about how they threw all the boys, you know, into the fire and how if you were circumcised as a Jewish person, you would have been thrown into the flames. So she's holding my brother whilst he's like picking his nose and I'm just sitting there and my sister's sitting there and we're just lapping up the stories of trauma and of sadness. And that's been my experience growing up, a mixture of we don't talk about it, it's too sad, or we talk about it all the time because it's too sad. So I'm curious, Itai, Lauren, I know you both have different trauma stories in your family. Have you got any weird things growing up, weird things in your house or weird phrases that your grandparents said that maybe indicated that you might also have experienced intergenerational trauma.
Well, funny you should ask that, Karen. One time I was sitting around the table with my two grandmothers that hated each other. My dad's an only child. My mum has a sister. Let's set the scene. One year, one of my grandmas gave the other grandma 10 pairs of pantyhose for her birthday. And she was so outraged. Pantyhose, disgusted, that the next year she wrapped them up and gave them back to her for her birthday.
Wow.
This went on for 10 years, back and forth. The story of the travelling pantyhose.
The sisterhood of the traveling.
The sisterhood of the travelling pantyhose. And then one day I was sitting at the table with them and they were talking about all sorts of things. And one of them said, I remember in the Holocaust we had horse meat in the soup. And my other grandma said, "Oh, you had horse meat? We didn't have horse meat. You're so good you have horse meat? It's not true you didn't have horse meat. She's so good." I was just like, I need to get out of here.
Oh my God. Have you seen, there is an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry David's at a dinner party and there is a Holocaust survivor who was invited and then there's a contestant from Survivor that's invited and they start arguing about who had it more tough. And one of them's like, we didn't eat for weeks. And then the Survivor contestant is like, we had to drink like horse blood and then do 50 push-ups and then, transcend, fly off a bridge and stuff like that. So that kind of reminds me of the experience of your grandparents.
Well, I think a good question to ask is, we've been describing the trauma or like what they've been through. I can just say quickly that in my family, it's actually the opposite, because there's also different ways to transfer trauma and like research shows. And I know it sounds smart to say that in front of sentences, but either people are completely silent about it. So you're not supposed to ask your grandparents anything about the number on their hand or their accent or whatever. And then you get the trauma. Either they talk about it all the time. And there's other ways, which is reliving the trauma. So, hiding food in the cupboard, stuff like that.
What do you think's the healthiest? Sorry to interrupt you. What would you choose?
I think that is a good link to your star sign as well. Of like, some people that would choose to approach it in a completely talkative way or in a completely, this is my story and I have to share it. Some people are like, we have to keep telling the story. And some people would be, this is behind me. Like a Capricorn, I would imagine, would be like, it doesn't matter. This is in my past. I came here to give my kids a better future. And that's it. I know from my family, it was, let's do the exact opposite. So like my grandparents came from Morocco and my grandma was an orphan. I think I mentioned it on the podcast that she was, she just woke up next to her dead mom when she was 7. And then she was just like kicked around as just like to stay with different families. We don't even know her star sign. Like they don't even know on which season she was born. Usually they say, oh, she was born on the hottest day of the year. Like no one knows. Like we don't know. My best guess would be that she's a Pisces just because she was so selfless. She was very adaptable. Maybe she was a Gemini, but you know what? She wasn't a woman of words. She was more a woman of like...
And she also has definitely been haunting our house.
Oh, yeah.
Every now and then I feel your grandmother around.
Yeah.
Like Itai has superstitions that have been transmitted, generationally through your family, which includes putting a bag of salt and a bread knife under your bed. So me being the open-minded, progressive woman that I am, I was like, yeah, cool, that sounds cool. I'll put that under my bed as well.
Well, I asked you if I can put it under your bed and you agreed. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, and so I did. But from time to time when I have a sense that there is a spirit or someone watching over me or in the house, which I'm pretty sure it's Itai's grandmother, even though I don't know her very well at all, because she's not alive. But sometimes the bread knife and the salt just magically appears on the side of my room. So it's come out of the bed and it's fallen, but it's kind of... It's been nudged a bit, and I never know what she's trying to communicate to me. Like, Is she my grandmother?
Maybe she's trying to communicate to you what the yoga teacher communicated to Lauren the other day about me. Take care of him. Maybe she wants you to take care of me. But
I try.
She definitely was a Pisces, and even her presence still in our life is definitely a Pisces move. Like, their soul is so old, they can't just let
She's
go.
gone to Australia, from Morocco to Israel, and now as a ghost in Australia.
But as I said, so it's really interesting because my grandfather came from a really rich and wealthy narrative, and she came from a I don't know where I'm going to live tomorrow narrative. And you could see how these both of these, well, I don't know if my grandfather life you could call it a generational trauma or maybe like a generational privilege, but her trauma and his privilege, how they got how they were clashing the whole time. Like she would always cook today's leftovers. She hide it in tomorrow's meal. And then when everyone will eat it, after they'll eat it, she'll be like, I tricked you. Like you literally ate leftovers. Like she would really be never throwing anything away. She didn't let us eat on the floor because it's a sign of losing someone. When in Judaism, when you sit on the floor when someone close to you dies. She always said, just shut up. Don't say how you feel. Put water in your mouth and don't speak. And she was very count your blessing now. Don't complain. Don't think you're special. Because I think she came from a family that she wouldn't want to stand out because then maybe they will kick her out.
And you had a very special relationship with her and your grandfather, didn't you?
Yeah, so I, as the normal kid that I was, my grandparents lived in a really small town with literally nothing, a street with a pizzeria and a toy shop. And I was spending more time in the pizzeria. But I would go during summer holidays, I would go by myself to stay with my grandparents, which were really two old people that were listening to the radio. They weren't they weren't like today's grandparents going on hikes or driving. They weren't driving around. And I would just stay with them for weeks, just go with my grandfather to the market and buy veggies and then, sit next to my grandma as she cooks and watch TV and eat chocolates. And that was I loved it.
Did you feel like you could be your full self when you spent those many weeks and months there?
I think so. Even though my auntie that was also living there keeps saying that I was crying in the bed and then she would come and ask me if everything okay and I would just be, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I never admitted.
Like your grandmother would say.
I know. I guess there's more in me that is from her. Even though my grandfather is an Aries, everyone knows. We were born 2 days apart, 1 day apart. So everyone knows his birthday, but no one knows my grandma's birthday.
Wow.
A Pisces, I have to, if there's anyone that you don't know their birthday, there must be a Pisces.
But how do you think that all of these stories translate and have manifested in our lives, now? How do you feel that
how many therapists have you seen, Lauren? Because I've seen a few.
At least 5 or 6, I'd say.
Okay.
Including couples counselling or not?
Look, there's no hard or fast rule. How does this manifest in our lives?
Yeah.
I think you can see this all the time. So, I'm third generation, so not, second generation, but third generation. Second generation because my dad is Israeli, so that's a whole another narrative, whole other cultural clash. I just know that there's so many weird hang-ups that my family have about everything. So my Israeli grandmother, for example, she had in their house a taxidermied cat. So they had a pet cat and it died and they stuffed it and it was always there staring at me. As a kid, I would go there and she's also a hoarder. And I'd be like, I hate this house. Everyone's a hoarder and there's a cat staring at me, this dead cat. And then also apparently she started stuffing all these kind of plates in weird hiding places. So she'd put plates inside the piano. She's now in an old age home and she steals cigarettes all the time just in case.
She doesn't smoke.
She doesn't smoke. She just likes to have them on hand. She steals
her
anger.
star sign?
I think she's actually also a Pisces or an Aquarius, maybe.
I would say
maybe
Aquarius.
An Aquarius. Yeah, she's a February. She's
also
a
a good
feather.
talker.
Yeah,
she's a feather.
She loves to have a good chat. But there's millions of ways. Also, my father and my family have about 50 50,000 chairs in their house. I don't know why. They've got 20,000
Sometimes,
chairs.
you know, some days you need chairs.
You need chairs. I don't
do
know.
need chairs.
And the fact, Lauren, that your family